listener production.
The world's most notorious criminals unknowingly spilling their secrets on a secure app run by the police. That's exactly what happened in Operation Ironside, a covert operation run by the FBI in collaboration with the Australian Federal Police. In this week's Rewind episode, Brent Sanders talks with Chris Craner, one of Australia's most experienced tactical operators. His 30-plus year career had him at the forefront of some of the country's most intense and high-stake investigations, including Ironside and the Lindt Cafe Siege.
All of a sudden there was phones going off and there was silence and everyone had stopped talking to each other. And you'd sit there and you go, what's going on? Next thing, someone would have read their message quick and went, there's a bloke with a bomb, and it looks like there might be other devices around the city, being the Opera House and I think Town Hall Railway Station. So, it was quite eerie to be in a counter-terrorism phone call and then hear that saying there's someone with a bomb in the city. And it would have been probably a minute later than that, and I was sitting in William Street in the city in police headquarters, sitting up nice and high, literally, a stone's throw away from Lindt Cafe. And in my old world, I'll be busting to get out the door and run down there straight away, but probably being there as a chief of staff and being more strategic. But what was eerie, you could hear the sirens. And as you heard the sirens, you thought, that's our staff heading off to this. And we go to sieges all the time. I've been to many sieges at a variety of different ranks and different outcomes. But this siege just seemed different. It was just weird that it happened during a CT meeting. It was eerie sitting up on a 14th floor of a building in the city and listening to all the sirens going and not knowing what they were going to face when they got there.
So this is at the very early stages of the Lindt Cafe Siege, and you'll be getting some information that's starting to come through, obviously, to those around the table. Where's that information coming from? Who's providing that information in these early stages that you're then acting upon?
Look, at that stage, the first thing we do once you've confirmed the trucks are on site, general duties are there, they'll confirm there's a siege. Everyone knows to go straight into what back then was contain and negotiate, and fundamentally that changed after Lindt Siege with a almost shoot to kill power, so to speak. But let's go back to contain and negotiate when the police turn up. They go through a chain of command. They'll tell the radio room that it's a siege, there's a person inside, there's hostages. The radio room will then put out notifications and we'll all get notifications. And I remember running out of the room and grabbing the deputy, who was an acting deputy, Jeff Loy at the time, and giving him a briefing on what was going on. And straight away we go into emergency management. So at that stage it was in Central Metro area, and Mick Fuller was the Assistant Commissioner for Central Metro. So the beast gets rolled out. Mick Fuller sets up his team, and a command and control team go into the Sydney Operations Centre, and they take over command and control of the whole operation as an emergency management event. And that's what it's classified at that time. So, my role was just briefing back to the deputy saying, we've got the chain of command, we've got command and control set up. This is the officer in charge. This is the forward command. So you would have to find a place down near the scene where there'd be a forward command post. And then that's kind of normally where it stays at deputy level. The AC runs it, being that this one was completely different. We ended up in a state crisis centre with the Premier and the Commissioner a little bit further on. But at that stage, we're just getting updates. And as soon as there's an update, there's a hint of counter-terrorism, then the deputies get together with the Commissioner. They go through a pre-formatted questionnaire, which then says, okay, stop. This is no longer a emergency management event. This is a counter-terrorism event. And at that stage, when they make that decision, then we have to change command and control. A whole new beast comes in. And that was when Assistant Commissioner Mark Murdoch came in with his counter-terrorism team. They take over the event and they run the event.
The information that's coming out is there are numerous other locations around Sydney where there could have been explosives and things such as that. Is this what then creates that counter-terrorism type category?
Yeah, again, it comes down when they do the classification and a whole range of factors, whether that's environmental or the person themselves. I think fairly earlier on, from memory, there was an ISIS flag, so that would obviously flag it. But yeah, so definitely at the time when there was additional devices alleged to have been all around the city, then that certainly, went from, okay, this is not Joe Blow having a domestic, or this is not a stick-up gone wrong. This is a coordinated event, which looks more like a counter-terrorism type thing. So even before, if there was, the flag, if there was before that, you're right, a coordinated event like that would raise issues with counter-terrorism.
Where are you now then as things are starting to roll?
So as the day went on, it looked like this was, we were going to bed in and this was going to take some time. So I think we might have handed over to someone separate at the State Crisis Centre. Jeff Loy and I went for a drive and went down to the rugby club, which was commandeered by some staff down there and made the police forward command. And it was quite eerie because it was a buzz. There was people running around everywhere, staff changing over from point duty, meals getting organised. And I remember opening up a broom closet. It wasn't even as big as a broom closet. And there was 2 or 3 negotiators there with headphones on, and they were having a live discussion with the hostages. And it was amazing just to look in and see everything abuzz outside. These calm, collected individuals in literally a broom closet negotiating. You just look at them and go, they are the first point of contact talking to those hostages at the moment. Like what's going on that phone is amazing. I remember when we finally, the biggest thing we had to find out who was it, because that would then assist us to try and find what the intent is in regards to confirming it's counter-terrorism or bring it back to emergency management, who was the person inside. And eventually when, I remember diving through every bit of information I could, taking phone calls from people, and then it eventually came out that it was Man Monis, and they looked up his criminal history and antecedents and intelligence, which confirmed it was staying as a CT event. But the focus really was who's the offender.
So, Chris, we're at a stage now where the siege has been going all day. It looks like it's going to be pushing through the night into the wee small hours. What happens to you then? Do you stick around? Do you go home? What does someone in your role do at that point?
Yeah, it was quite fluent. We were trying to work out, do we go in? Do we use the cover of darkness? Do we take lights out? What's the best situation? And it was deemed at that stage, because that's what we did, was control. So it was made a decision. I was stood down probably about midnight. Deputy said to me, look, go get a hotel, stay close by, I'll call you if I need you. And I think even the commissioner had gone home. Deputy decided to stay through the night and a skeleton staff. I rang a mate of mine who was an inspector at the city who was driving around in a marked car and grabbed him for a coffee because I wasn't ready to sleep after being through the day we'd been through. Sat down, had a coffee, then went to get to the hotel and thought I haven't got any change of clothes, so undies, socks, toothbrush. I went to a 7-Eleven on Oxford Street and got what I could. Went to the hotel, put the TV on to watch a bit of it, and then literally got changed, jumped into bed. I was in bed probably 5 minutes, and the deputy rang up and said, get back to the office, go and get the other deputy, Kath Byrne. Building's been stormed, shots have been fired, people are dead and injured, get back. That was it. And that was a different feeling, driving to that State Crisis Centre and getting in there and then getting a briefing off the deputy about, I walked in and went, what the happened? What's happened? And the deputy's just explained he's had a shot. We've got 2 that we know that are dead. SPG of State Protection Group has stormed the building. There's been flashbang shot fired and there's people injured. And that's as much as he knew at that stage. And that progressed then in the next, hour or so. You watch them all come back in and you look at their faces. The commissioner came back in, the commissioner's staff came back in, the premier comes back in, the police minister comes back in. And maybe, 2 hours later or what it was, they were having a briefing and we sat outside the briefing room just so we could hear what was going on in the briefing room, but operationally we could also hear what was going on so we could be dual reporting. And I remember a conversation where it was briefing to the premier, and he obviously was quite upset that people had been injured, and it was a comment made there that it might be friendly fire, and the premier didn't know what that was until it was explained that the shots might have been ours. And that was just another game changer of another point of the night where someone's realised, gone, shit, I didn't think of that. Like, you think if shots are fired, the offender's done it. But early on that stage, we couldn't discount the fact that there were friendly fire and people may have been injured by the cops themselves.
So if I could, Chris, just to circle back to that point where, and this information's coming through pretty thick and fast as you walk into that meeting, but shots were fired, they believe, by Monis within the cafe at some point, and that's led to the members of the SPG, the State Protection Group, storming into the cafe, and then there's an exchange of gunfire. Am I reading that correctly?
Yep.
Yeah. And in that exchange of gunfire, my understanding is Man Monis was shot by police and I think passed away at the scene, and there was it 1 or 2 other of the hostages that also, maybe through ricochet or something like that, were injured?
I think it's quite well known. Torrey Johnson was executed by Monis at the time. Katrina Dawson was shot and killed. And then there are others there also injured. And Louisa Hope was also injured from fragments. At that stage, I can't remember now, but they were fragments or ricochets or direct hits. but I'm pretty sure it's, the public record is Katrina Dawson was terribly shot by the police, and Louisa Hope was shot by ricochets, whether they be ours or the offenders.
Louisa Hope, who you mentioned as one of the hostages, is a person that you've remained friends with since that incident, and I believe is a huge advocate for the police and has a very unique view of this whole siege, of course, being one of the people on the inside looking out.
Yeah, a lovely lady. We've stayed friends, texting each other through personal matters, through work matters. She's just a lovely lady that has come back, and I wouldn't say forgiven's not the word, but she has forgiven because she never held any ill will towards him in the first place. But she went back and met the State Protection Group. She's met the people that may have shot her, and she speaks highly about the police, and she does motivational speaking, and she does talk to events where the police are. She's just an amazing lady.
If there was a Lindt Cafe Siege today in Sydney, what are the key differences as to how that would be handled?
Yeah, I think that the legislative powers and the powers that the police now have in regards to either contain and negotiate, or in a counter-terrorism incident like that one, if there's more imminent danger, police have the chance, have the opportunity, and they can take a shot, then under direction they'll get told to take that shot. It's literally, I can't remember the name of the power. I worked so much on it when I was in the Commissioner's office, but I try and forget a lot of things. But effectively it was known by shoot-to-kill powers, where they can take the target out. Normally, unless there's a imminent threat to your life or serious injury or danger to someone or yourself, you can shoot or take whatever means necessary. This was more preemptive. So I thought if Lindt Siege happened now, it would be more preemptive and a preemptive shot, and the job would be over quicker, and there'd be better collaboration, which was obviously a criticism as well. There'd be a lot better collaboration with a high-risk incident like that with other partner agencies.
I understand that in your role, you had a meeting the following morning with, amongst others, possibly members of the State Protection Group who were there to storm the cafe. That must have been an interesting discussion to have with members of that group.
Yeah, no, it was a good call by the Deputy, Jeff Loy, who, as we left the State Crisis Centre, I thought it was time to start heading south and head home. But we were such on a high, we went to go get a coffee, and the boss goes, let's go see the team, and he'd organised to go and meet the State Protection guys that actually stormed the building. So we went in there, they all got corralled into a meeting room, and Jeff had a chat to them and just obviously thanked them for the work they had done. But as I looked around the room, I saw a mate of mine who actually had blood and wounds on his face, and I later found out, I went up and said to him, mate, what happened? And he said, I copped fragments at the time and I was shot as I went in. So I think he was shot with fragments from Monash as he entered the building. So I didn't realise at that time that he was there during the whole siege. So for me, it was kind of, a bit more personal, going, far out, mate, you were there all night. I was there all night. I didn't know you were there. And even interesting that when there's people who you don't know were there. I think once the event was over, the Commissioner came out and said that his wife and daughter were actually in the Lindt Cafe prior to it being taken over by Monash. So that was something the Commissioner held tight to his chest, that his wife and daughter were in there. So there was a connection for all of us there, and the good thing out of it, we learned a lot. We got new powers, and I got a great friend out of Louisa Hope, and so did New South Wales Police Force for what she does to us.
When you're watching these things from afar, as folks do, TV, it was almost like 24-hour coverage. I mean, it happened right across the road from Channel 7, literally. And you look at police like your State Protection Group, and you look at them going into a location like that, and to the outside looking in, they're almost quite robotic. They're almost like stormtroopers from Star Trek or something. They've got all the gear on and the night vision goggles if they're wearing them, and in they go. But it's easy to forget that inside all of that gear, like with the riot police, and inside that there's people who are husbands, they're possibly wives, some of them their fathers, their sons, daughters, and that can easily be lost, I think, in something like this. It's when you're looking at it from the outside, and it's just interesting, Chris, that you speak about that personal connection that you had with one of those SPG guys.
Yeah, well, I mean, in an emergency action, I've been there myself, where you just make the decision, we're going in, you'll boot a door in and you'll go in. You don't think about what you're saying there about the family and that I'm a husband and this, that and the other. But these poor buggers had to sit around for so long, and they were prepared so many times to go in. They wanted to go in, but a number of them actually texted home and said goodbye. They thought it was over. They thought they were going into a live bomb. So they knew they were going to have to go in at some point, but they had so much time to sit around and wait and think about it, as opposed to just, it's happened, get in there, go. So that's what the mind games for them, and to then let them go through those mind games, and then you watch them on TV and see them robotic. That's how professional they were. They put all that aside, game on, helmet on, in we go. And, hats off to them.
Coming up, Operation Ironside, a covert operation that caught some of the world's most notorious criminals.
Chris, if we can move forward to 2019, Operation Ironside. This is a joint operation with the FBI with regards to creating a handset to be used to listen to criminal activity. Chris, you had some quite high-level involvement in this. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, look, I was seconded down to the AFP to do a job for the Commissioner and to bring a single point of contact into the AFP nationally and internationally, and also do some work around his office. Or at that time, looking back at it now, although I was in the Commissioner's office, I had no idea what Operation Ironside was. I wasn't briefed in. The AFP are very good at need to know and security clearances, and it is in fact called need to know. I just didn't need to know, basically, so I was not told anything about Ironside. A couple of months later, I was then the Assistant Commissioner at Western Central Command, and that encompasses Western Australia, South Australia, Northern Territory, and it's responsible and oversight for drug importation, counter-terrorism, child exploitation, counter-terrorism response to the airports at those states, and also the security and management of the defence secret American bases between Exmouth, Geraldton and Pine Gap. So it's quite a fair chunk of Australia, and even initially, again, I still wasn't briefed into Ironside. I'd been over to Canberra and someone had mentioned something to me and said, in a secure location, and I had the clearances that we need to brief you properly about Ironside. About a month later, I heard the word again pop up. And it was like this secret word that very rarely popped up. If it did, it was in a dark, dingy place. And I found I've got to find out more about this. So I was then fully briefed into Ironside, which, as we know, is that long-term covert investigation into transnational and serious organised crime. And that was responsible for, large crime imports, drug importations, and attempts to kill between organised crime groups, really. So, what I learnt was that it was a 3-year operation that the AFP had been doing with the FBI, and it was happening predominantly on the East Coast, but the West Coast was being briefed in because there were jobs over in the West Coast. As soon as the crooks would talk on the platform, wherever that location was that they were going to do something, then there'd be a notification made. So I had to be notified of what was going on, and we had a response team as well. Adelaide has obviously got some high areas of organised crime, and there was a fair focus. There was more work in South Australia than there was in Western Australia for the Ironside. So we just literally get a phone call saying, here's some information. That's about as much as you're going to get. There's been a tear line in the information. There is, I remember one job, $6 million sitting in a house, but you can't say it's come from Ironside. You can't reveal the source where it's come from because we can't burn the platform, because the platform's going so well that you're just going to have to work out. So there's legal ways around the fact that we worked out surveillance and a whole range of different things, but enough information for us to legally obtain a search warrant, boot the door in, get the $6 million out. And I remember talking to counterparts in Wapol going, mate, how'd you get that? And I went, just good police work. There was a lot of just good police work going on because we couldn't declare. It was hard, I had some good friends that you couldn't declare it. You couldn't talk about it. You couldn't sit in a cafe and talk about Ironside or what a good job last night. We got $6 million. Because even some of the troops doing those warrants didn't know where the information had come from. We started getting more and more jobs where, and COVID was on at the time, where money wasn't leaving the country or the state. We were being told about locations in an hour or two's time where they'll be digging up holes and in parks north of Perth, throwing a couple $1 million in there, and then a couple of hours later someone else would turn up and take it. And one job that we watched, we knew it was going to happen, so we watched them dig it in, put the money in. We went up there an hour later and took it, and we put a camera up there hidden and watched the next person turn up. Quite excited to pick up their next couple of $1 million out of the dirt, but we'd already taken it, and to watch them dig around in 35-degree heat was hilarious, just seeing this poor bugger sit there trying to dig up half of the national park to get his money out, which wasn't there anymore. My past life, especially in the King's Cross Drug Unit and UC work, I was an expert in evidence in court for decoding drug books. You'd find a drug book and you'd see a word, and I'd have to decode that to say this is what it means in real world. This was just straight up, does anyone want a kilo? Does anyone want a kilo of coke? We're going to bash this person, we're going to go kill this person. It was just straight up. There was photos, like in a drug book, it was encoded so you couldn't know what they were talking about. The lay person wouldn't know. There was so much confidence in this platform that they were literally, the Commissioner mentioned it, just showing their wrongdoings to each other. That made it quite easy for us to pick them off individually.
With that sort of intelligence, even though it's, as you mentioned before, it's kept very, very tightly, very in close on a need-to-know basis, how do you prevent some of that or any of that sort of getting out? Because it's a big ask, isn't it?
Yeah, it was kept tight. Like I said, when I turned up, I went in there as an acting assistant commissioner, and then I was made assistant commissioner. I still didn't get briefed in properly. I remember at the time we had to do a few jobs. There was a drug manufacturer we knew that was going on in South Australia. We didn't have the resources in the AFP to deal with it at the time, and we needed some separation that it wasn't the AFP to undertake it, so it doesn't look suspicious. And we had to ring up and brief in SAPOL to get them and go and do the job. But again, we couldn't declare where it was, and if we couldn't get the right information out to get a warrant, then there would have been another discussion of what do we do, how do we stop it. But that was handed over to SAPOL, and I think SAPOL had said afterwards, we wonder where you kept getting all this information from. You're just giving us all these good jobs. And the commissioner mentioned it in his press conference. There was 20 threat to kills. So once, that these devices for 3 years were being listened to live, there was a team hidden away listening to everything. And there was some artificial intelligence used, and there was a list if the certain words that were picked off and a threat to kill was benchmarked. And there was a couple of jobs in South Australia where an outlaw motorcycle gang was going to steal a motorbike, take a high-power weapon, go down the main street of Adelaide and shoot a number of offenders. So we'd have to ring up SAPOL. And at that stage, I don't think we'd briefed too many people in. By that stage, I believe we'd managed to brief one of the assistant commissioners and say, we can't tell you everything, but we need to tell you this, we have to stop it. And those sort of things were starting to happen more and more regular, and we were starting to tell more and more people. And I think it just came to its end of its life, I think around that June, when they decided to pull the pin and stop Ironside and do the arrest phase, that there was certainly some legislative requirements by the FBI when the warrants had to expire and finish up. But I think our life at that stage would have to involve too many people. There was too many jobs coming out of it that as soon as the offenders were arrested and they had to go to court and we had to declare a whole lot of more information at court, then it would have, unstuck Ironside. And, it led to 224 arrests, 526 charges, 3.7 tonnes of drugs, 104 weapons. I think I had 9 high-powers in Western Australia, $45 million in cash seized, plus the assets on top of that, and then the threat to kill. So, I remember doing the press conference and a journo just goes, how do you explain it? I said, well, mate, imagine if I put a hot device, a mobile phone that I could listen to you in your back pocket and what I would learn in 24 hours. That's what it was, basically.
Yeah, for 3 years.
Yeah, for 3 years. Yeah, so, I said that at the time when I did the press conference with the two commissioners from AFP in Western Australia, they outsmarted, they played the long game. We broke their communications back. There is a massive dint in the market at this time, and that's where I try and bring it back to the human side and say, these people don't give a shit about you. The offenders don't care. You work hard, you work 3 or 4 days, 3 or 4 jobs a week to pay your mortgage, to buy your holidays, to buy your cars. These crooks are just dealing in your money. They're selling to your family. The amount of accidents that are caused on roads because of drugs, and then if you go to the hospital tomorrow, and I've tried to humanise it when I do interviews and say, there's a massive waiting list. There's been a car accident. You have to wait 3 hours. Car accident. At the moment there's a lot of drug driving. Those drugs have come from somewhere. It's just trying to get that human thing. If here's your chance when you're going to knock on the door and go get your drugs. We've probably locked that person up during Ironside. Here's your chance to actually go, I'm going to stop. I'm going to go try and get some help. I'm going to talk to someone and try and bring those other agencies in to make a bit of a difference, because you all know they're going to find another platform. They might not trust it for a while. They trusted this one for 3 years and then it got turned over. They might be on one now that is being monitored. They just don't know when you break that confidence, but they will find other ways and the drugs will still come in. So it's just why you got that opportunity for that maximum impact.
Chris, can I take you to Australia Day 2016? I think you're offered a position at Commander at Port Stephens. You start there, you didn't know really anyone there at all, moved there with your family. Can you just share with us arriving there and who you met and how things unfolded there?
Yeah, well, I'd just come up from, I was the staff officer to the Deputy Commissioner and I was offered the position up at Port Stephens. So, the Port Stephens and the Newcastle rumour mill had gone into overdrive. There was a new commander and, they're researching you and checking you out. And I walk in there not knowing anybody and they seem to know all your secrets before you even get there. And Newcastle is almost like the Newcastle Police Force. It's a bit different to the New South Wales Police Force. It's quite remote, the way they operate themselves. But yeah, it was Australia Day. I think we only landed there 2 days earlier, unpacked the car into the house. And Australia Day, I was around at Nelson Bay Police Station, walking in the back of the police station. There was a barbecue on. There was troops everywhere. There was buses where everyone had come in, because Australia Day on Nelson Bay and Shoal Bay was quite a big event. I walk in and you can almost, it's like walking into a country western bar, some city slicker, and the place just stopped and stared at you. So
Shark
I said,
in the harbour, I
yeah,
think.
pretty much, whale in the bay. So, I went inside the building, said hello to a few of the staff, and the first person I remember in the mill room meeting was Jeff Richardson. And Port Stephens always had the nickname of God's waiting room. It's a retirement village. And that's the way the crime was also perceived up there, that there wasn't a lot of crime. It was quite a relaxed atmosphere. And I'd always come from a high impact. I'd been in the King's Cross drug unit, and I'd been in undercover areas. I'd always been fast paced in any theft squad. So it was interesting to see how I was going to go. But nevertheless, Jeff came running up to me and welcomed me. G'day, boss, how you going? Great to meet you. I'm in the proactive team. There's a couple of us here where, we go out, we kick butt, we lock up people. There's druggies here. There's still a lot of work to do. And they steal from motor vehicles. We do everything we can to look after the community. And he was just pumped, absolutely pumped. I went, oh, sweet. I've met someone who's a little bit like me who's pumped. So I guess I'd heard so many things about the Sleepy Hollows. Little did I know this was going to be my favourite place I ever worked in 30 years. So I finished the shift. I went out and drove around pretty much all night, as I like to do. Even as the commander, I like to go out with the troops, go to a few jobs, got home. And it would have been probably 2 weeks later, we were up at Murray's Brewery, myself, my wife and the 3 kids. And as we're just at the brewery having lunch, in the fields, I hear someone screaming out, boss, boss. And it was Jeff came running over to me. And I said to Beck, oh, it's Jeff who I told you about, one of the blokes I met. And Jeff came up all excited. He was chain of command. He very much respected rank. Where the rank above him, he respected it, let alone a superintendent. He was very respectful. So Jeff came up and said, oh, do you want to come meet my family? So I took my family down. He introduced me to Margie and Patrick and Aidan, they're 2 young boys. And we sat there, had a beer, and later on we drove home. And I said to my wife, we're going to be all right. Like, we didn't know anyone, but we've just met a good family. Met Jeff and Margie and the boys. We're going to be all right. Fast forward a couple more weeks, and on the 5th of March, so it was on the weekend, and clearly I was on call, in bed asleep. Phone rings about 11:30 at night, and it's one of the inspectors, Al Jansen, who rings me and says, oh, just got to give you an update, boss. There's a pursuit, and we've got radio silence on one of the cars, Port Stephens 14. I said, okay, what's happened? He said, well, there's been a pursuit going on, and one of our cars went out there with spikes to get ahead of it. And we can't locate that car. We can't hear it. It's radio silence. And I said, okay, give me a call back when you know more. So, I went back in bed, didn't sleep. Probably 10 or 15 minutes later, Al rings up again and said, we found the car. The sergeant's in the car and he's dead. It's hit a tree. And I don't know what I said at the time, but you just look at it. My wife looked at me. She's seen me get woken up, 3 or 4 times a night for normal jobs. And I just get into them. You turn in auto mode, and this one I must have paused and had a bit of blank look on my face, and she looked at me and I didn't say anything, and then I just said, who is it? And he said, it's Jeff Richardson. And just turned to my wife and went, oh, it's Jeff, it's our mate, it's only bloke we just met. So I go downstairs. It was just the things you remember. It's funny. I remember just getting the ironing board out, ironing a uniform, getting my dress shoes out instead of my boots, putting that on, and I have to drive around the corner, literally 2 or 3 streets to Margie, wake her up and tell her that, Jeff's been killed, he's not coming home. Luckily, 2 bloody good sergeants beat me to it, who were best mates with Jeff and Margie, and they officially did the death notice themselves. I pulled up at their house, and I could hear Margie from the time I opened the door. Went down, and they said, we've already told her. Sorry, we didn't wait for you. We just thought we should tell her. And they made, a huge call on that. I went in and sat with Margie for the next few hours, and we laughed about it later. She said, I knew something was wrong because I kept bloody dropping tears on your dress shoes because you had your polished, fancy shoes. And she goes, I knew something was wrong when you turned up. And it was almost like she hadn't listened to the sergeants, but when the boss turned up and he had his dress shoes on, she goes, the shit hit the fan. I knew something was wrong, even though she'd already been told Jeff had been killed. We sat there, cried together, had a chat together, and then I had to do the notifications, and that's where chain of command kicks in, and you go up the ranks all the way to the commissioner's office. I think the next morning the commissioner flew up with his staff at Raymond Terrace or at Nelson Bay. I can't remember where he flew into. Took the commissioner around to see Margie. Margie's family turn up, And I was pretty determined that I was going to shoulder the pain of this on behalf of the troops. Because that morning we finished the shift at 6 o'clock. We went back and we signed Jeff off the roster altogether, because you start him, it was a paper roster. You sign him on, you sign him off. We completed his shift for him and gave him 3 cheers at the end of the shift. That's when the next day the commissioner turned up, met the family, and then Margie's family I took out to the crash site. Margie just wasn't in a state where she wanted to see that crash site. So I took Jeff's dad and his 2 brothers out there to the scene. And from then it just snowballed. It was enormous. The funeral in Newcastle was absolutely enormous. The community rallied together for it. What had happened effectively was there was a pursuit with a known offender. At that stage he wasn't known, but he was a crook up in that area. Cops were chasing him in a car chase. They radio, as they do, call for anyone trained in road spikes. Anyone can deploy road spikes. You have to be trained. You have to carry them. Jeff was standing out the front of the police station at Raymond Terrace with Al Jansen, the inspector, and Jeff said, "I've got spikes. I'm trained. I can go." They listened to the pursuit a little bit longer, trying to see which direction it was heading, to then strategically get in front of that car to deploy some spikes. Jeff made the decision that he's going to do it, and Al was the last one to see him drive off. And what Jeff was trying to do was strategically get in front of that car to find a safe location. We have a range of SOPs about where you can deploy them, where you can't deploy them. Jeff went off the expressway, went off down Lovedale Road, miscalculated a sweeping left-hand bend and went straight into a tree and was pretty much killed instantly. So that was the situation where he wasn't actively in the pursuit. He was trying to get in front of the pursuit to stop the vehicle to make it safer for everyone else.
The story that you're telling, Chris, to my is it doesn't matter whether you're a superintendent, doesn't matter you were a probationary constable. The toughest job in the police, I think, bar none, is that job, isn't it? Walking up that driveway, knocking on that door and forming next of kin. And I can only imagine what it's like when you have that relationship with the family and also with the deceased. That's got to be up there as one of the toughest jobs you've ever done in the police, I would say.
Yeah, look, no one likes the death messages to a point. I like them because you can be compassionate. You can actually help that person through the very first time. But when it affects your staff like that, you see the staff and you see those 2 sergeants that actually did what they did and went and delivered that to Margie, and then you watch the pain of your entire police force. There's some young kids there that absolutely idolised Jeff. Jeff was their buddy. And you just go back to the shift, and we sat them all down at the end of the shift and just go, this is going to be a world of pain for a lot of people. But, unfortunately also it is something that the cops do really well. They put on a very good funeral. And we often say we do send people off with a lot of dignity and respect. And, it was probably, I think the following January, February after that, Police Remembrance Day. And we all went down to, we had a whole range of events, fundraisers for Jeff and the family. And then we went down to Police Remembrance Day in Sydney. And Margie was there. And poor Margie, I think, before lunchtime, we had to slip her a couple of vodkas just to get her through the event because she was going to be shattered. And there's a lot of footage of her and myself standing there at that wall, the Police Remembrance Wall in Sydney, and laying a wreath for Jeff together and having our troops there. And then we went down to Canberra to the National Police Remembrance Wall in Canberra where Jeff was going to be honoured. And his plaque was going to be put on the wall and the Prime Minister was going to be there. And typical Canberra weather, it was fine as we got in, but it just was blowing sideways. The rain, it was 0 degrees. And we sat there and they tried to put tarps over us and it was absolutely freezing. We were drenched, and Margie's sitting next to the Prime Minister. He's got her arm around her, talking to her. And, Margie was the show and Jeff was the show for the day. And we finally finished and we walked back down. It was mud by this time to the car. And it was myself, Margie, and one of her friends, and we got in the car. I'd never been that cold or wet in my life, and I turned to Margie and said, "Sorry, Margie, with respect." And I just went, "F*** you, Jeff, this is freezing." And then Margie just went, "F*** you, Jeff, put us through this shit." And we just laughed our heads off. It was the most somber moment. We'd just been comforted by the Prime Minister. We'd been crying the whole time, and then we just absolutely laughed our heads off in the car because we were just screaming out at Jeff going, "How dare you put us through this?" So, yeah, but, Margie's inspirational. I was only talking to her yesterday just to let her know I was doing this. Patrick and Aidan. Patrick's been doing the charity ride from Sydney to Canberra, representing his dad and representing legatees. So everything, something comes out of something.
Yeah, good on you, mate. You're based now in Western Australia. Can you give us just a bit of an overview of your professional life now and where that is, Chris?
Towards the end of last year, I just decided to look at something different and what else is out there for the next. I wanted to make one more career jump. Then I spoke to a friend of mine who works for KordaMentha, and at that stage I didn't know much about KordaMentha. So, I went and met KordaMentha, and I said the buzzwords family-friendly work-life balance, and this partner pulled me on and said, what does that mean for you? And this was during an interview, and I said to him, good question. You're the first person to actually pull me up, because we say the buzzwords, the motherhood statements, and sometimes you can't back them up. And I thought about it for about 10 seconds, and everything flashed through my eyes, what I've just explained to you in regards to Lindt, Ironside, Jeff Dye, and a whole range of 1,000 other different things. And I said, I just want to be more present at the dinner table. When the kids talk about their day at school, my wife talks, it's not white noise. I actually want to listen to it, because previously I'm sitting there thinking, okay, it's Ironside, there's a drug job coming in there, there's a threat to kill, there's a siege going to happen, the phone's going to ring soon, and you're just not paying that attention. I said, I'll work my butt for you. I work hard for you, but it's just that downtime. And, now I can actually walk across to the park and leave my phone in the house. But it's not for everyone's not ready to go. So I suppose my theme behind that is just, hope's not a plan. Grass isn't always greener, and it might be for the job, but it might not be for the person. So it's just an opportunity to say that there is life outside of the cops, and it's a very good life. But I don't regret anything to do with the cops. When people complain about, TJF, I don't like the job. And I'll go, mate, it's paid your kids' school fees, it's paid for your holidays, it's paid your mortgage for the last 20 years. What is there you don't like about it? It's just more being positive and reinforcing and just saying, the cops have so many transferable skills. There are jobs out there. There are good jobs, and I'm just very happy that I've landed in KordaMentha, because they are just different to other consultancy groups.
Chris, mate, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Chris, you've joined us from the studio across there in Perth, Western Australia, where, as you've just said, you've transitioned from 30 years odd policing into a new and very exciting environment. A very distinguished career. Not all that stay in the job for that length of time get to those high level of commission ranks that you did, both New South Wales Police and Australian Federal Policing. The thing I've really enjoyed about our chat, Chris, is it's not only that the high level involvement with cases like the Lindt Cafe Siege and also that insight into that Operation Ironside, but it's that those human stories, those personal stories that you've told, and you've told them with real openness, and so above and beyond all those high level jobs that you've done, Chris, is those very human and personal stories, and thank you so much for taking the time to share them with us. Thank you for your 30 years plus service both here and in Western Australia, and all the very best to you, Chris, moving forward.
Thanks, Brent. Really appreciate it.
That's all we have time for in this Rewind episode. If you know someone who loves true crime, recommend our series to them. And check out our favourite clips. Search Listener Crime on TikTok or Instagram. I'm Dan Mullins. Thanks for listening.